Sao Paulo. So essentially, so long as you are doing this lab in any other region, it's going to work. If not, make sure you put your S3 bucket in one of these regions. Make sure it's not in South America or in Asia Pacific, in particular Singapore, because otherwise the glacier part of this lab won't work, because glacier doesn't exist in Singapore or in South America. So I'm just going to go back to the S3 console, and we'll just go back in here. So we've created our bucket, so it's called My Lifecycle Bucket London. And then just down in here, what I'm going to do is, first of all, we're going to look at versioning. So versioning is currently turned off. You can have it on or off with lifecycle management. It's completely up to you. I would enable it just so you can get the full features. So we're going to enable it on this bucket. And then we're going to go down to lifecycle management, and we're going to go in and add a rule. First of all, it says choose rule target. So the whole bucket or a prefix. And a prefix is just a folder within your bucket, or a folder and a particular object within your bucket. So I'm just going to do it on the whole bucket. I'm going to go ahead and configure the rule. Okay, so what are lifecycle rules? Well, lifecycle rules will help you manage your storage costs by controlling the lifecycle of your objects or files. Create lifecycle rules to automatically transition your files to the standard infrequent access storage class, or archive them off to the Glacier storage class and remove them after a specified time period. So let's have a look at the different options here. So we've got action on current version, so action on the current version of the file, action on the previous versions of the files, and then action on incomplete or multi-part uploads. And you'll only see this particular part, action on previous versions of the file, if you have versioning enabled on your S3 bucket. So let's start from the start. So we're going to click on this one, and it brings up this really cool little graphic. It makes it very easy to understand. So in this option, we're going to transition to the standard infrequent access storage class for our current version of the file 30 days after the object has been created. So here we are, it's December 29th at the moment. I upload an object to S3, it might be a Hello Cloud Gurus version 1, and then 30 days later I'm going to then move that over to the standard infrequently accessed storage class. Okay, so then I can click on this one, and then 60 days after the object's creation date, so after we created the object, not 60 days from when we changed storage classes, but from when it was first created, we're then going to archive this off to Glacier. And then we can expire, and this is for versioning enabled buckets only, and then expire basically just puts the delete marker or the Harry Potter cloak over the file, so that you can basically, the current version of the object is still there, but you can't see it in the bucket anymore. And so we might want to do that 425 days later, or we might want to do that, let's say, 61 days later. And so there we go. So let's run through this again. So I create the file, it's uploaded to S3. 30 days later, we are going to transition it over to infrequently accessed storage. And then 60 days after the creation date, on February 27th, it's going to be archived off to Glacier. And a day later, I'm actually going to expire that object from my bucket, and so it basically no longer appears in the bucket. But of course, because we've got versioning enabled, it's just a delete marker that's across it. Let's go over to the versioning section, so action on previous versions. So now, transition to the standard infrequent access storage class. So if I click on this, let's have a look at the graphic because it makes it easier. So let's say I update my object with Hello Cloud Gurus version 2. So the current version is overwritten or expired. Exactly 30 days later, I'm going to transition the previous version to standard infrequently accessed storage. And then 60 days after that object has been updated, I'm going to archive it off to Glacier, and then permanently delete. Now this rule permanently deletes a previous version of the object as the version becomes eligible for expiration. You cannot recover permanently deleted versions of the object. Now this actually deletes it from Glacier as well. And if you put in 61 days here, you're going to get an error message down here, and it's saying, look, you're deleting a Glacier object within 90 days. It says objects archived to Glacier incur costs for at least 90 days of storage, even if they are deleted or overwritten earlier. So what does that mean? Well, let's go through it one more time. So basically, I've got my current version. We've updated it saying Hello Cloud Gurus version 2. 30 days after we did the update, we archived it off to infrequently accessed storage. 60 days after we did the update, it's archived off to Glacier. and 61 days, we're actually permanently deleting it from Glacier. Now Glacier is designed for 90 days storage minimum, so it's going to be 90 plus 60 in order to get rid of this error message. So we're going to need 150 days. So if we type in 150 in here, you can see the error message goes away. We drop it down one day, the error message comes back. And then finally, just down here, end and clean up incomplete multi-part uploads. This basically says if you've got a multi-part upload that was not completed within a predefined number of days after initiation, delete it. It can save you on some storage costs, so go ahead and click that. So this is the really nice UI. I love how it does this, diagram for you and actually puts dates in so you can visualize it a lot better. This is the old UI though, guys, so let's have a look at the new UI in a second. And now we can just put in our rules, so we'll call it my lifecycle rule. And now we can just put in our rule, so we'll call it my lifecycle rule. And then I'm just going to go ahead and create and activate the rule. And now that's in place, so any object that I put there as a new object, or any object that I put in there to update, that's going to go through a whole lifecycle management. Within 30 days, it's going to be in frequently accessed. Within 60 days of being uploaded or updated, it's going to go off to Glacier, and then it's going to be deleted 90 days after it has been archived off to Glacier. Okay, so let's switch over to the new management console. We can do that just by going down to storage management and hitting opt-in. And this is the new management console. We can go ahead and now hit create bucket, and we'll call this my lifecycle bucket London 2, my lifecycle bucket London 2. And then I'm just going to obviously deploy this into the London region. You can deploy it wherever you want, aside from those regions that don't have Glacier. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hit next. And in here we can do our properties. So I'm going to turn versioning on again, similarly to how we did in the last one. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to leave the user permissions the same. Go ahead and create the bucket. So I've got my bucket here, and now if I want to basically turn on lifecycle policies, I click on the bucket. Then I'm going to go into lifecycle, and then in here we can add our lifecycle rule. So we're going to call this lifecycle rule 2, lifecycle rule 2, and I'm going to apply this across the entire bucket. So I just leave this blank. You could limit it to a specific folder or a specific object if you wanted. Go ahead and hit next, and then configure transitions. So we've got, just like in the old one, we have current versions and previous versions. I'm going to do both current and previous. And then here it says you do not have any transitions set up for current versions of objects. I'm going to go in here and add my transitions. And now it's just drop-down menus instead of radio buttons. So we're going to transition to standard infrequently accessed after, and it doesn't default. So if I just type in 3, it's going to give us an error message. So I'm going to have to type in 30 days in here. And I'm going to add another transition. We're going to archive it off to Glacier 60 days later. And then if I just had 6, it's going to say 30 days before transitioning to the Glacier class. So it says enter an integer value greater than or equal to 60. I'm going to put 60 in there. And then this is for previous versions of objects. So I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to put in 30 and add a transition. And down here I'm going to put in 60. But you'll notice there's no like diagrams or any kind of dates, so it's hard to understand, and that's why I showed you the old UI first, because it's a lot easier to understand the actual concepts as to what's going on. Then configure expiration. So this is the expiration section. So do we want to expire the current version after, let's say, 30 days after the object was created? We can't do 30 days. The minimum one here is for 61 days. So let's say we're going to expire it 61 days after. And then the previous versions, and this expire, remember that's deleting the delete marker. The actual current version of it is still there. And then permanently delete previous versions. And in here we can say, let's say 60. No, it's going to say 61. So we're going to permanently delete our previous version 61 days after an update from the previous, from the original version. And then down here we can click on clean up incomplete multi-part uploads. We'll do that 7 days after the start of the upload. So this is exactly the same policy as what we created in the other one, but it's difficult. I just find it difficult to understand. I don't know about you guys. I just like seeing the the actual diagram and the dates, and it helps me visualize it a lot better, and it's much more better explained. So maybe Amazon will change the UI. Hopefully they will, based on feedback. And so hit saved, and then we can see lifecycle rule 2. And if we go back to S3, we can go back in and see our other lifecycle rule, which we created in the old UI. And you can just click in it to see what it is that it's actually doing, just by clicking edit up here. And